everyone. I'm Elisa Sherman, and I'm the CEO of Ellementa, and this is our Wellness Wednesday, kind of a webinar, but not really a webinar. It's more like a gathering and an interactive movement extravaganza, right?
Yes.
We have with us Laura Putnam, and I have to give a little intro, and then I'll have her do her intro so you know who she is and what she does. But I connected with Laura when I was working on a book with Beth Cantor. It's called The Happy Healthy Nonprofit. And we talked about the 3 pillars of fitness. One is nutrition, one is sleep, and the 3 pillars of health and wellness: sleep, fitness, nutrition. Sleep, fitness, nutrition. All right, got it. And the fitness part was really just about moving. It wasn't about let's have a really strict exercise routine. And I was looking for an expert. I think it was Beth who knew about your work, Laura, knew about your book as well, Workplace Wellness That Works. Can you hold it up real quick? And there it is, beautiful. We messaged Laura, and she was actually quoted in the book under the fitness section. So this is wonderful to have you here, Laura. Can you tell us about your work, what it is that you do?
You bet. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me, Elisa, and thanks to everybody who's listening in. I'm really looking forward to hearing from all of you and getting lots of questions and comments. But I am kind of different from many of the others that are in this space of health and wellness. I call myself I was a competitive gymnast, I was a professional dancer, I was an urban public high school teacher. I taught history. I worked on Capitol Hill, actually. I was staff for the Senate Judiciary Committee. Actually, Joe Biden was the chair of the committee at the time. And I call myself now a movement builder in the space of health and wellness. And I started my company Motion Infusion in 2008. And as the name suggests, the organization is really about getting people and teams and organizations in motion, as in, please don't have a seat. So this really ties to the fitness piece that you were talking about, Elisa. But also getting people in motion as on a more figurative level, as in helping people to make change. And so that's really the piece that we've zeroed in on, talk a lot about, when it comes to the basics to better health and well-being, you would be hard-pressed to find any smoker who doesn't know that smoking's bad for them, or anybody who doesn't know that it's a good idea to get more exercise or eat more broccoli. But less than 3% of Americans do those 3 simple things. And we know that on top of that, there are a lot of other elements to better health and well-being. And so the real question is, unpacking this, what I characterize as a knowing and doing gap. Why is it that if people know what to do, they don't? And we'll be talking more about this when we talk about movement. But movement is really a proxy for any other element of well-being. It really is, so much of it is about just getting ourselves to do those things that we already know we should be doing. And movement is, all these other aspects of well-being are so important, like being connected to others, feeling like you have a sense of purpose in life, feeling like you have a good relationship with your bank account, all of these kinds of things, feeling like you're part of your community. All of these things are really essential to our overall well-being. But movement is just magical, and movement beyond just, going to the gym and getting fit, but really about moving, because that's not only the avenue to better health, but it's also the avenue to connecting with others. It's an avenue to really being, one of the things I discovered as a gymnast is that it's an avenue for self-expression. And
okay, interesting, because so the thing that popped in my mind was it's a way to be present and immediate as well. So self-expression, that's Pretty interesting. So one of the questions I had was, what does movement do for us? So you kind of outlined that. Do you have a few other things? Because I know you want to show us something.
I do. So movement, very simply, is one of the best things that we can do, not only for our bodies, but also for our brains. It's one of the best things that we can do to be happier. It's one of the best things that we can do to be part of a community. So I like to demonstrate how movement.
I'm like so nervous because you've already shown me this, and I was like going, whoa, okay.
Movement not only can revitalize our body, but it can also really awaken our brains. And so we're going to start with an exercise that is called a contralateral exercise, meaning we're going to be moving the left and the right sides of the body. And this helps to actually increase the synapses between our brain cells, between the left and the right side of the brain, so that we can engage in more whole brain thinking. So just as you talked about, Elisa, this helps us to be more present. It helps us to be more creative, and it helps us to be better decision makers. So are we ready to try out our first exercise? Okay.
I promoted this as easy, and then as soon as you showed me this, I'm like, this should be easy, but my brain was going, whoa.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to ask everybody to stand. It's a little bit easier to stand. And I'm also going to ask you to actually count with me as I go through this. And you'll find that if you're counting as we're doing this, it's actually a little bit easier to do it. So with your right arm, 1, 2, there you go, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay, so pretty straightforward. That's the right side. Now we're going to do the left side. So here we go. Again, counting with me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Good. Okay, so now we're going to practice each side a little bit faster. So again, Elisa, counting with me as we go through this.
Okay.
Right side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Great. And left side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay, so we're all ready. Now we're going to put the two together. That's the tricky part.
All right.
And again, counting with me. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And we'll do it one more time. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Well done.
Yay.
So imagine if you started your next team meeting, for example, with doing that exercise, or imagine if you're getting ready to do some brainstorming and you first start off with this exercise. I use this exercise all the time. I use it for keynotes, I use it for workshops, but it really kind of wakes up everybody.
Yeah, it's very invigorating because I feel it in my arms because I was moving my arms, but I'm also feeling it literally in my head.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's remarkable what movement does. I mean, interestingly enough, lots and lots of research on the benefits of movement, again, beyond the health benefits, which are important. But I think it's really important to recognize just the magnitude of the benefits that it brings. So for example, there have been studies showing that the benefits of movement are equivalent to the benefits of Zoloft when it comes to treating depression without the side effects. Or the California Department of Education has repeatedly shown that students who are physically active academically outperform their less fit peers. So it really truly is one of the very, very best things that we can do for our brains. Or for example, in Finland, which arguably has the best school system in the world, did you know that they actually have a 15-minute break every hour for the children just to play and move?
Wow.
And it's amazing. So it's, you know, that's what they have found has really enables the kids to be able to focus and learn better if they're moving.
So I've heard this saying, there's a TED Talk about this, and we wrote about it in the Happy Healthy Nonprofit, as well as this seems like something that you talk a lot about. There is, I'm not even sure who originally said it, that sitting is the new smoking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you know, it's not good for us at all. So what, can you elaborate a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. I mean, so smoking rates have actually gone down precipitously in the United States. It used to be that nearly 40% of Americans were smokers, and we brought that down to less than half. So it truly is a public health success story. Now, meanwhile, at the same time that we have reduced our smoking rates across the population, we've increased the time that we spend sitting. And there's some interesting research showing that when it comes to longevity, the benefits of getting more active and sitting less actually outweighs the benefits of quitting smoking. Not by much.
But that's interesting that they would even make a correlation, because I remember when we were writing about this, Beth Cantor again had introduced this. She didn't come up with the concept, but she told me about this, and I thought, whoa, what a weird comparison. It just seems so extreme. And yet then she started to cite all of these medical studies, these scientific studies.
Absolutely. And I think it's really taken us by surprise. I mean, we now in the United States and increasingly around the world, we're sitting on average about 11 hours a day.
Whoa.
And so you know, the number of jobs that we do are increasingly sedentary. The activities that we do are increasingly sedentary. And while it seems like a relatively benign activity to be sitting, whereas something like smoking is pretty obvious that the harmful effects of it are pretty apparent, are pretty self-evident.
Right.
Where you think, oh, I'm sitting, it's not such a big deal. But the research coming out now shows that we truly are born to move. And if we're sitting, too much sitting in one day, maybe as little as 3 hours.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, okay, I have to sort of interrupt for a moment. This is not a paid commercial, by the way, although I will disclose that I did receive this item I'm about to show you guys for free, so I could review it later. But I just happened to have it, and we were talking about motion, and the next thing we're going to talk about are easy ways to get moving. And so I kind of thought this was fitting and really interesting. They contacted me out of the blue since we do these wellness things. This is called a fluid stance balance board. I had never heard of it. I mean, I know of balance boards being used in physical therapy. That's usually where I hear them being used. But the premise behind this, and it comes in all these different really nice wood tones, is you put this in front of your desk. This is meant to be for the office. Mm-hmm. And stand on it, and it gives just enough of a tilt that it's not interfering. Like, you can still type, you can still work, but when you're doing that standing, because you're supposed to, I mean, this is what the experts are saying, I'm sure, like you, stand and sit and alternate. But it gives you,
Lisa, I like to say the best position is the next position.
I love it.
So in other words, you know, it's not just about standing all day. It's not just about sitting all day. It's not even about lying down all day. It's like changing up the position.
Right. Right. And this is meant for when you are standing. It's just an alternate way of keeping a little movement, core action, a little leg action. It's called fluid stance at fluidstance.com. I just thought it was the coolest thing. I'm so excited about it. So, okay, simple ways to get some more movement in. I promise people we're going to be more interactive, and I know you've got some more exercises for us.
You got it. Well, I just want to follow up on your point about this kind of fluid stance and about having active positions. So one of the things about my background is I've actually lived and worked in Africa for 3 years. And when I was a little girl, we lived in Ethiopia for a couple of years, and then I went back and did some work in Ghana. And one of the things that really struck me about being there is being reminded of what life was like before there was a need to exercise.
Right.
And even so, every single thing that you do in a rural setting, a traditional village, requires movement.
Right.
So if you want to have a drink of water, then you need to carry a bucket down a quarter of a mile, pump the water pump, fill the bucket, bring it back up, and then you can have your drink of water. Or if you want to get food, then you need to go out to the farm and harvest the produce. Or if you even want to cook, you're in an active position. And I'm curious, how many of you are comfortable in a squat position? And I'm gonna model that for you. This is something that's often done in yoga classes. So you separate your feet a little bit and you squat. So this is called malasana in yoga, but this is a position that people sit in all the time.
And so, women give birth in that position in other countries.
Exactly. So when you're eating your dinner, you're seated like this. But notice how this is a really active position, and I can easily go up and down. It's an active position. I'm using my quads. I'm engaging those large muscle groups. So an interesting study that they did with older Japanese women who are often using that more active stance for doing everything from cooking to household chores is that they actually had a much lower incidence of hip fractures. So it's so important for us to be thinking about, how can we start to kind of integrate more movement and even start to adopt more active stances like squatting. So, and the interesting thing about this is like, how many of you would feel comfortable doing a squat in
not in a meeting, I don't think. But coming to think of it, as we age, our joints become stiffer and weaker, our core weakens. And I have noticed over the last year or so, my hips hurt a lot. Mm-hmm. I'm lacking some core strength. And I think if I actually started getting used to squatting and develop some of those muscles and movement that involves squatting, that could potentially help relieve some of this and strengthen, because I have osteopenia, which is the precursor to osteoporosis.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So squatting would be weight bearing.
Great. Yep, absolutely. So there's two ways to thinking about, in terms of thinking about getting more movement. And this really ties to the conversation that we're having right now. And this is based on the research of somebody by the name of James Levine, who's with the Mayo Clinic, who's been studying the effects of too much sitting for a long time. And so he talks about movement in kind of two different forms: EAT, which stands for exercise activity thermogenesis, and NEAT, which stands for non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So that's all of the incidental movement in our days. And what's happened because of all the labor-saving devices that have been introduced into our culture, so everything from elevators to moving sidewalks to even things like having heating or running water, all of these, or washing machines, all of these effectively represent lost opportunities to move. We used to walk our chores more often, now we drive. So the trick is, how can I start to integrate more movement into everything that I do? So something very simple, like every time I take a phone call, that's a trigger for me to stand up. I'm going to stand and walk this phone call. You can walk.
Because most of our phones are cordless anyway.
Exactly. Or what about next time we have a team meeting? What if we made it a walking meeting, for example? Or what if our next one-on-one is a walking meeting? And that can even be done virtually. So I want to share with you an example of something that you might do in the office to kind of integrate a little bit more movement into your workday. And the trick is here, you want to move at least once every hour for at least a couple of minutes. So at a minimum, standing up, moving around a little bit, and then sitting back down, that seems to help to offset the effects of the dangers of sitting for too long. So this is actually called motion infusion in the office. And it's just some exercises that you can do actually more or less seated at your desk. So I'm gonna scoot my chair back here a little bit so you can see what I'm doing. And we're actually gonna start with our eyes. So I'm starting really small. So I want you to extend your arm forward, one arm forward, and then just draw figure eights in the air. And then without moving your head, see if you can follow your finger through the air. And you can try making the figure eight a little wider, a little loopier, so that you're challenging your peripheral vision a little bit more. And then you can reverse it. And so again, you're following your finger through the air, and then shake it out. So that's actually an exercise for your eyes that helps to realign the left and the right eye movement. This is actually a strategy that's sometimes used with children to help them with reading. Sometimes children who are having a difficult time reading is because their eyes aren't tracking well. So it's important to remember those little things. So staying small, we're gonna now move to our fingertips. And I'm gonna actually come in a little bit closer for this. Okay, so you put the finger pads together and just stretch your fingers a little bit. I call this spider push-ups, and release. And again, stretch your fingers and release. So this is something that's, and again, stretch, really important to be doing when we're spending so much time on our computers. We're putting a lot of stress on our small little muscles, and release and shake it out. Okay, now we're gonna try finger splits. So bring your index fingers up, middle fingers down, and stretch between those fingers. So finger splits, and then go the other way, middle finger up, index finger down.
Oh,
and
wow.
Then, I know. And then move down, so middle finger up, ring finger down. And then the other way, ring finger up, middle fingers down.
Whoa.
And then pinkies up, ring finger down. And then last but not least, ring finger up and pinkies.
How in the world do you get your pinkies to operate? Okay.
Right.
Wow, that is amazing.
There we go. Okay, you shake it up. Okay, good. Now.
So intense. I don't think any of us are paying enough attention to either our hands.
Yeah, I know. So now bring your fingers in opposition, and you're gonna stretch out your forearm. And again, another part of our body that really gets overtaxed. And then the other way. So again, opposite fingers, and then you're just gonna stretch. So I feel a stretch along my forearm right here. And again, switch. And one more time, switch. And then shake it up. Okay, good. All right, now drop your right ear to your right shoulder. Good. And then slide your left shoulder away. So you get a little bit more stretch along the left side of your neck. Yeah. And you can kind of drop your arms down by your side. And then gently turn your chin toward your right shoulder and then nod up and down. Drop your chin all the way down. Pick up your right hand and gently pull. And so you feel a nice stretch along the left side of your neck. And then bring your head back to neutral. Now drop your left ear to your left shoulder. Slide your right shoulder away. And then turn your chin towards your shoulder. Nod up and down. Drop your chin down. Pick up your left hand and gently pull. And then bring your head back to neutral. And I'm just curious, Aliza, did you feel a difference between one side and the other?
I did. I have arthritis on the right side of my neck, so it was a lot stiffer. Also, if you think about it, if I ever do hands-free, but I have to be like that.
Yeah.
And then I'm right-handed, so my right side always seems to be a little bit achier or stiffer or developed in a different way than my left side.
Yeah. So it's important to notice those movement patterns that we do over and over again that can actually create a lot of that tightness. So now we're going to reach our left arm up. There you go. And lean over to the left side. Good.
It's amazing how much exercise you can do sitting. I
know. And then go the other way. Reach your right arm and go over to your left side. Okay, and then bring it back up. Now we're going to make this a little bit more complicated. So reach your left arm up. Lean over to the right side. Then come through the center, rounding. And then over to your left side, reaching your right arm. And then bring your arm down. Again, right arm up. Lean over to your left side, round through the center, over to your right side, reaching your left arm, and then come all the way up. Good. Okay, now imagine that there's a balloon that's connected to your chest, and that balloon is going to lift up your chest, and your head is going to drop back a little bit, and then somebody pokes you in the belly, and you're going to curve the other way and exhale as you do that. So again, inhale, the balloon lifts you up. Your head drops back, and then exhale, you're going to curve and round. One more time. Inhale, the balloon lifts you up. Exhale, curve.
This reminds me of cat-cow pose.
Yes, it is a version of cat-cow. All right, now we're going to make this a little trickier. The balloon lifts you up, arch your back, tilt your head back, then keeping your back arched, come forward. Let your head then drop between your knees and round all the way back. And then like a rope is pulling you all the way up to a lengthened position, come back up. And again, inhale, arch, come forward with an arched spine. Let your head drop down between your knees. Exhale, curve and round back. And lengthen all the way up on the inhale. Good. Now we're going to reverse that. Exhale, curve. Then round forward, and then start with the top of your head, and you're gonna arch up. So you're doing a body roll. So you're arching up. And again, exhale, curve. So round spine, round forward, then start with the top of your head and arch back up.
Wow.
Excellent. Good. Okay, so we're gonna move down into our legs a little bit here. So hopefully you can see me. You're gonna extend your right leg forward. So your heel is on the floor and my left knee is bent, but my right leg is extended, heel on the floor.
So toes up like that?
Correct.
Okay.
So my foot is flexed like that.
Got it.
And the heel is on the floor. My hands are on my hips. It's as if I have a safety belt here. I lengthen my spine, so I feel that string kind of pull up through the top of my head, and then come forward with the lengthened spine. So I feel a nice stretch along the back of the leg. And then come back up. And then change sides. So extend your left leg out, heel on the floor, lengthen up, and then exhale, come forward. Good. And then come back up. Okay, now bring your legs back to that neutral position. So your legs here are in a nice hip width position. Now you're going to take your right ankle, cross it over your left knee. And again, I've got that flex position with my foot. That helps to protect my knee. So you see how I'm seated here? Mm-hmm. Again, right foot is flexed. My right knee is down. And just that alone, do you feel a nice opening in your hip?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So we can add to that by reaching the arms up, inhale, and then exhale, just kind of drape your body over your legs.
Whoa. Okay.
And then come back up. Change sides.
Yeah, my hips are super tight.
So again,
good to do.
Flex foot. And again, feel the stretch even right here. You can put a little bit of pressure on that left side here. Inhale, reach your arms up. Exhale, drape your body over. And then come back up. Okay, uncross your legs. Now we're actually going to stand up from our chair. I'm going to move my chair out of the way. Okay, now you can see me here. I'm going to clasp my hands. I'm going to come close really quick, right behind, and then extend them out as much as I can. So I'm getting a little bit of an opening here in my chest. Do you feel that? And if you lift your hands up behind you, feel more of an opening.
Oh, yeah.
You feel that?
Yeah.
Stay with that, or you can soften your knees a little bit and lean forward. So you get a nice big stretch. And then from here, release your arms. Let your head be heavy, and then slowly round up one vertebrae at a time until you're in a standing position. Motion infusion in the office. Whoa, easy. So I want to, so that's a way, Elisa, to get a little bit of, again, neat. So kind of a way, creative way to kind of integrate a little bit of movement into your daily work if you're sitting at a desk. Just that little bit can just feel so like a huge release, doesn't it? And it only takes a couple of minutes.
Wow. So was that the eat or the neat?
That was the neat. So I'm
the neat. Okay.
When you're ready, I can talk a little bit about the eat part, but I wanted to just first just take a moment to kind of take that in and see if you wanted to talk at all about this idea of neat. And I want to add one thing about neat, which is I often say that we are born to move, but we are culturally mandated to sit. We're told to sit.
Mm.
So one of the first things that people usually say to us when we come into their home or to their office, have a seat. We teach our children to sit and be still. That's one of the very first things that we teach them to do. And even the concept of chair is associated with power. So, for example, the chair of the board, or you run for a county seat, for example. So everything in our culture really revolves around our chairs, revolves around us sitting a lot. Our neighborhoods are better designed for our cars than they are for us getting physically active. So that's just something to keep in mind when we're wondering, gosh, why is it that I'm not moving enough? Just know, I would say that we're more creatures of culture than we are creatures of habit. So right. Just take a moment to acknowledge just how much our culture really shapes the choices that we make. So we have to consciously counter those cultural influences, but it's important to recognize just how much we're shaped by those.
Wow.
So if we happen to have been born in the 1800s, it's not that people in the 1800s were that much more motivated to move. They just happened to be born into a culture in which movement was a way of life, much more so than it is today.
Right.
So that's an important thing to keep in mind. So Elisa, do you want to add to that before I show some examples of how you can think about getting more eat?
Let's go straight to eat.
Okay. So this is kind of how you can think about being your own personal trainer. So we're going to stand for this again. So one of there's really 4 aspects to physical fitness. So the first is cardiovascular. So how do you get a little bit more endurance? So I like to imagine that I have a jump rope. So just kind of moving my arms here is a way to start kind of getting the blood moving. And then I can start even moving as if I'm doing an imaginary jump roping here. And I can start to lift my knees up more. But all of this, something like this, what if you did this for 2 minutes every hour?
Oh, yeah.
Right? So that's something that you can do, or you can do both feet at the same time. So when you're thinking about being your own personal trainer, you want to think about cardiovascular exercises, something like jump roping, walking, running, any of those kinds of things. The second piece is strength. And I would say that the most important strength exercise that you could do is a squat. This is about having physical independence for as long as you possibly can, where you're able to sit down unassisted and stand back up unassisted. So when you're doing a squat, you want to separate your feet so they're hip width distance apart. You want to keep the weight in the heels and then sit back as if you're kissing an imaginary chair, and then you stand back up. So again, let's do 5 of these. 1, and then come back up. 2, and then come back up. 3, and then come back up. 4, and then last one, 5. Good. Okay, so cardiovascular strength, those are 2 important elements. Then flexibility is your 3rd leg here. So let's work on a little flexibility. Separate out your feet nice and wide, turn out your toes, and we're gonna work on a little bit of hip flexibility here. Okay, so as far as you can go down into your squat, and then you can push your knees out. Whoa. This is a great way to get some openness. Now, if that feels too much, go ahead and come back up, separate your feet out a little bit more, bend your knees so they're kind of in alignment with your heels, place your hands on your quads, and then you're gonna stretch one shoulder forward and push your knees back at the same time. So you feel nice opener in your inner thighs here. Can you feel that, Elisa?
Oh, gotcha.
Okay, then come back up, and then the other side. So bend and bring your right shoulder forward now. Good, and then bring it back up. Good, so flexibility is the 3rd element. Excellent. And then the 4th one, and one that you were really getting at, Elisa, with your board, and if you want to hold that board up again so that people can see that, is, there we go, balance. And I think that balance is something that we don't think about doing that much, but it's really the foundation and something that's really essential for healthy aging. And so we have to sustain our balance, and it's something that we can work on. So we're gonna do a balance exercise. Okay, so go ahead and come back to your neutral position here. And now you're gonna shift your weight onto your right foot, so you're gonna lift up your left leg. Now just kind of feel that, and you want to really support this as much as possible with your core. So that's really the center of your balance. And notice also how much sight helps you. So if you're feeling like you're having trouble balancing, find one spot to look at, and that can really help to stabilize you. So conversely, notice what happens when you close your eyes. It becomes really hard to keep that position, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let's try the other side. So now pick up your right foot, standing on your left leg. And again, really hold it from the center. Think about that string coming out to the top of your head, lengthening you up, and just kind of relax your arms at the same time. Okay, good. Now, so that feels pretty comfortable for everybody. Elisa, are you ready to bring it up one more to the next level?
Let's do it.
Okay, so back to the first side, and you're gonna pick up your left foot. Now pick up your left hand. Okay, good. Now I want you to reach back with your left leg and reach forward with your left arm. Good, and then see if you can bring it back up. There you go, and then come back to the neutral position. Other side, pick up your right foot, right hand. Now reach back and reach forward. And then bring it back and back to neutral. Okay, so we've got one more level up. We ready?
Okay.
Okay. Left foot up, left hand up. Okay, now reach the left foot back, the left arm forward. Now see if you can, you're gonna soften your right knee a little bit. See if you can touch all the way down to the floor. And then bring everything back up. Good.
Whoa, okay.
So a good stability exercise. Let's try the other side. Pick up your right knee, right hand. Okay, now reach back with your right leg. Reach forward with your right arm. Now touch all the way down, bending your left knee a little bit here. And then bring everything back up. And then return to neutral.
Whoa. All right.
What'd you think?
Well, you know, it's interesting because besides my core and my hips, I'm noticing my ankles seem weak and wobbly. So it's really drawing my attention to, weaknesses in my overall structure, places I need to work on.
Yeah, it's interesting to kind of notice those weak spots and know that's an area that needs a little bit more attention. Yeah.
Yes. So I want to just mention anyone who's watching live, we have a lot of people here live. Feel free to type in some comments or questions if you have access to the chat. I have one more question, and I'll also keep an eye out to see if anybody else has some questions. I don't know about you all, but from this very little amount of movement, so clearly I got my heart going a little and my breathing going a little, and my muscles feel vibrant and alive, so that's a good thing. So doing this over time, developing a good habit over time, keeping moving over time, I mean, that's just the hardest part for many of us. I mean, how do you keep on moving? How do you make sure you keep on moving?
Yeah, that is the hard part. You know, it's easy to start something, but how do you keep doing it day in and day out? And how do you stay motivated over time? There's been some really interesting research around that. One is the mindset that we bring to it. So one really interesting study by a woman at Stanford by the name of Aaliyah Crum found that just the mindset that we bring to something can change the outcomes. Mm-hmm. So this was a study that they did actually with housekeepers working in hotels. And they had a wellness program at this hotel. And these housekeepers were told, you know, that you need to, the basics that we talked about at the beginning, you need to exercise. Well, you know, the last thing after a day of cleaning rooms, the last thing that you want to do is to exercise. So what the researchers asked them to consider that the work they were doing was exercise. And so they had half of the group that just they did as they normally did, and the other half was told to really bring that mindset. Gosh, when I'm doing this, it's good for my body and I'm getting exercise just by the work that I do. And they found that the difference, that there were actual physiological differences between these two groups. So just starting to go to recognize, gosh, when I play with my kids and we kind of move around a little bit, that's exercise.
When I do housework, it is exercise.
That's exercise, right? So really, right? Then also, I often ask people, what is the very, very best kind of exercise that you can do? So, question for you.
Walking.
Okay, so your answer is walking?
My answer is walking, I guess.
Okay, so the answer is whatever you enjoy.
Good answer. Good answer. That's great. Oh, right. By the way, we do have a question here from Linda. Well, first she wants to know, do you have a list of these exercises? Are those in your book? Or do you have?
Not in my book, but it's called Motion Infusion in the Office, and happy to share that.
Okay, so how do we get the list from you? I mean, I could send it out, obviously, to our list, but...
So the best place is to email me, and I can send that email to you, Elisa, so you can make that available to people, or you can just go directly onto the Motion Infusion website. But my email is laura@motioninfusion.com. So if you want to email me, I'd be more than happy to send you a guide to those exercises.
And then another question is, since everyone is working from home right now, what's the best way to share this with their employer? Because a lot of this comes from the top. That's one of the things that in the Happy Healthy Nonprofit book with Beth Cantor, we talked about. The first section is, how do you take care of yourself and self-care? And then the second is, how do you take care of your organization? We care. And we talk about a lot of it has to come from the top, modeled from the top, policies from the top, encouragement from the top, although ideas tend to bubble up from everybody else. So what are your suggestions on how to share this with an employer?
Yeah, so yes, you need senior leaders on board. They're the ones who set the tone. They're the ones who allocate resources. But interestingly enough, and an area of where we've really focused our efforts is actually the middle manager. The manager, your boss, has a shocking level of influence over your health and well-being. And so while the senior leaders are the ones who, again, set the tone, allocate resources, it really comes down to your direct boss to kind of give you permission. So for example, your company might have a lot of wellness programming around stress management and how important it is to turn off your computer at night. But if you happen to have a boss who sends late night emails
and expects a response,
but even if they don't expect a response, they do. That's kind of the cultural norm within the team. There's studies showing that for every hour that a manager engages in after hours email time, that roughly translates into an added 20 minutes of after hours email time for team members. So managers have just a really surprising level of influence on their team members' behaviors, for better or for worse. And so the manager alone, according to research by decades of research by Gallup, likely accounts for 70% of the variance of their team members' engagement, both with their work as well as their well-being. We also have some research that's been published and cited by the Mayo Clinic, or some original research that we've conducted around the power of the manager, that when a manager models well-being, they do. It's not about being perfect, it's about making the effort. When they talk about it, and when they create some team-based systems to normalize well-being within the context of their team, it actually creates a kind of a trickle-down effect, where it not only enhances the productivity level and well-being for the leaders, for the team leaders, but also for their team members as well. So I just can't emphasize enough how important the team leader's role is, and I would argue much more so than the senior leaders. I've seen over and over again in the work that we do, the power of a manager-driven movement of well-being. So for example, we've worked with companies like Schindler Elevator Corporation, and it was the managers who really drove a movement of well-being throughout the organization. And it was with very simple kinds of rituals, like beginning to hold walking meetings. Those kinds of things done, those small things done consistently really make a difference. And I would say in the time that we're in right now, with this social unrest, with the financial distress, and with the being in the midst of a pandemic, the manager plays such an important role in creating a safe harbor for their team. And so, I mean, one shocking study found that when it comes to the health of our heart, our boss matters more than our doctor does. So when we hear people say, my boss is killing me, they actually kind of mean it. So that's actually a Swedish study that found, some Swedish researchers found that. So managers just cannot underestimate how important they are in terms of providing kind of this safe harbor of demonstrating compassion for their team members, and also kind of explicitly and positively promoting well-being within the context of their team.
Right. So interesting. Can you hold your book up again? Because I would think that getting a couple of copies of your book for the manager, maybe a little gift for the CEO, maybe for your colleagues, and even for if you're a freelancer, for your, I'm a freelancer, so for my editor or something like that, because many of us have those jobs, and now we're really forced to sit in front of the computer. Hopefully you are also adjusting your desk so that you could stand and work. But as you said, take a break every hour, easy enough to set an alarm that is repeats on the hour
Mhm.
on your smartphone. Super easy to do a reminder like that, or even on your calendar, just build it in between meetings and calls and
And
have
the
it.
more you can do it with other people, so if you're independent and you've got some colleagues, the more you can make this a group effort
Yeah.
and keep each
And
other accountable, the more likely you are to do it. That if you're part of an organization, if you can really think about making a team-based effort to move more and to be well, that's really going to make the biggest difference.
yeah, I think this is incredible. I've always heard of like chair yoga, and I kept thinking, what in the world can you do? Just the things that you showed, so much of it was reminiscent of yoga moves that I'm
Yes.
familiar with, and it really did get the blood pumping, and I thought that was amazing. So I appreciate you so much. Thank you for being here and sharing all of this with us, and we'll let everybody know when the recording is done. If you're watching this recording sometime in the future, hopefully you're inspired and much more aware of how movement is so important in your life, but how you can easily add it in to different day-to-day things that you're doing. Or, like you had said, Laura, changed your perception about the day-to-day things you're doing and think of them as that movement, that essential movement and exercise that you need so much.
Absolutely. So some final thoughts is please don't have a seat. So next time somebody says have a seat, just try it. Like, no thanks. See what happens. To remember that there is always time. I often hear people say, I'd love to move, but I don't have time. But if we think about neat as opposed to eat, there is always time to be able to do that. And then finally, I think what's particularly relevant in the time that we're in right now is this idea that there is no me without you, meaning that my health matters to you and your health matters to me, and that the best way for us to move more, be more well, is to really begin to think about health and well-being as a collective effort. And so we know, for example, that one of the best things that we can do to make sure that what happened to George Floyd never happens again is this really has to be a community investment. It's never going to happen one police officer at a time. It has to be a more systemic effort. And so I would say that the same is true when it comes to movement and better health. And I'm just amazed at the number of conversations about how important it is for us to be investing in our communities. And that's so true, not only when it comes to ensuring the safety of everybody, but also in terms of ensuring the health and well-being of everybody.
Yeah, I think it really boils down to community wellness.
Absolutely.
Everything does start with us as individuals. If we can change our mindsets, if we can become more aware and more movement, eat right, sleep right, behave well to ourselves, and then realize how interconnected we are with others, and do the same, and look for sort of the collective wellness. That's one way to make positive change.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for being here. We will be back with Wednesday and Sundays. Every Wednesday, every Sunday, we're doing these wellness gatherings, conversation chats, collective movement toward wellness. Thanks for being here, everyone.
Thank you.